As many? The chair recognizes the honourable member for Fort Charlotte.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise on behalf of the great people of the constituency of Fort Charlotte, who I once again must thank for this tremendous privilege of being able to represent them as best that I can as a voice for all sides, as a voice that cares deeply, as we all in here do, for the people of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, I must first acknowledge that I appreciate and someone's wrong with the mic? Sorry. Is it okay? I appreciate the passion that the member for North Eleuthera has shown during his presentation. And like him, I'm frustrated that certain things may not be happening fast enough. Many Bahamians, Mr. Speaker, PLP, FNM, DNA, they too are frustrated that things are not happening fast enough.
NDP too.
Mr. Speaker, the fact of the matter is, though, in this new year, I hope to have learned from some of the mistakes I made in the last year. And that instead of being so quick to blame and being in such a rush to criticize, I do a better job of offering solutions.
Good man. Good man.
And you know, Mr. Speaker, it would not help our cause as government if we do not at least remind the public that in politics, all is not what it seems. Many games are played, many things are done behind the scenes in an attempt to undermine the work of a government or members of a political party or the political party itself. And when in opposition, even if one is a new member, as the member for North Eleuthera is, one cannot act as though the party that he is a member of, that was the prior administration, was not guilty of much of the same things that he's now criticizing this administration for. You see, when you say that you and your grouping would not want to write a blank check for this government, we on this side could say the very same thing about you and your party that was a short time ago the government for this country.
That's why we're looking forward. That's why we're here.
$120 million was what this government was told it would cost to complete the New Providence Road Improvement Program or project. It ended up costing almost 100% more, in excess of $200 million. Many in the public decried the lack of fiscal prudence involved in the execution of that program. Hence, the FNM is no longer in large part the government today because of that fiscal mismanagement. The member for North Eleuthera talks about jobs on his island that I'm very sensitive to because I travel to Eleuthera. And the people of Eleuthera are fantastic people like all Bahamians are. And they are frustrated. They are frustrated because they feel as though their cries are falling on deaf ears. And they want to know how is it that they have invested in things, equipment, that they are willing and able to use but not given the opportunity when the investors that have come to that island under the guise of injecting life into that island are holding on to those opportunities for themselves. And so I sympathize with the member who has to represent a very frustrated electorate, as many of us have to do. And the question we must ask is, do we genuinely believe in Bahamians, and will we use our policy and the power of our office to influence the actions of our foreign investors? But you see, when the FNM was the government, they presided over the beginning of a project in Bimini where many of the workers were transplanted from, not from the family of islands, as is trying to be done now under this administration, but many of them came from South Florida and Mexico, and in some cases, I believe, the Dominican Republic. And the members who sit in opposition today, who sat around the cabinet table, they can attest to that. Was it wrong when they did it? Because it cannot be wrong now if it's happening under this government, if it wasn't wrong enough for them to criticize about it while it was happening under their administration. And that is the hypocrisy that we have to deal with. Either a law is universal and applies to all, or we end up with a society that is totally duplicitous, where we say one grouping is eligible to do something, but we deprive another grouping of doing the very same thing. Mr. Speaker, the fact of the matter is, this resolution that we debate today has to do with the fact that if we are willing to be honest and frank with the Bahamian people, it has to do with the fact that this government is constrained. This government is challenged with the available resources necessary to provide what it would like to provide to stimulate this economy. And you know, as I talk about Eleuthera, because I had my own little focus when I was fortunate enough to run for the Progressive Liberal Party, and I ran for Fort Charlotte, and I said I would keep it real. So people sometimes don't understand because they think, well, you're a little bit too aggressive and outspoken. And they wonder why. I say, because you know what? There are certain things that I cannot do. My resources are significantly limited. But one thing I knew that I always had ample of was my ability to communicate and to speak frankly. And I said to myself, remember to keep it real. And so I reference back to Eleuthera again. We know that we are constrained as a government. Resources are in very limited supply. And we're talking about having national insurance provide the resources needed to improve a building here that is in dire need of repair. But I take issue with the fact that we don't, as a government collectively, whether it be FNM or PLP, acknowledge to the Bahamian public that we cannot be all things to all people. We cannot do in each of these constituencies all that the constituents want for us to do. We cannot do in Eleuthera the same thing we do in New Providence and the same thing we do in Grand Bahama. Mr. Speaker, every time, and I understand the pressure that is on the member for Central and South Eleuthera, but we cannot say that we are expecting there to be a new mini hospital in Central and South Eleuthera when we know that the little clinics that we have there now do not have the most basic of supplies to operate. And yet we peddle this talk as though this is an election promise that is going to guarantee my return to office. But you go there now, and I speak from a position of knowledge, and they do not have the most basic of supplies with the little building that they have now. So how could you expect to promise a mini hospital? Where are the resources coming from? You see, I want to go further. The attempt, this is, I quote from a text called Internet Gaming Law, page 111. We said that we're here to try to pass a resolution to get monies to be able to do something where we know monies are tight. Page 111 says, the attempt to forbid participation in gambling online has been mostly a failure, especially in the United States. Internet gambling has not only continued to thrive and grow, but has, in quotations, come ashore from the offshore environment. It says, and I continue, Such countries as mainland China and Saudi Arabia have been more or less able to bar their citizens from access to gambling, as well as other forbidden matters such as erotic literature and democratic ideals, etc., etc. And it is trying to give an argument as to the futility, the absolute waste of time in trying to control the internet and access thereto. And it says, first, because access is so widespread, the detection and surveillance assets needed to track individual access to forbidden sites would represent a prohibitive expenditure of time, money, and resources. Pray tell, where does the government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas intend to get the resources to police the internet to ensure that those who are gaining access to the internet sites that the member for Long Island reference and the member for Montague reference are being accessed on a daily basis in this country, where will we get the resources to prevent them from gaining access to those instruments? Mr. Speaker, it is beyond me. We talk about, the member for Pinewood talked about $2.5 million that we're gonna get from this BTC deal. We must be joking. $2.5 million, and the member for Montague and the Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, the Attorney General, and the commission, and no less than the Commissioner of Police of the Royal Bahamas Police Force could all tell you that internet gaming is taking place in this country and something has to be done about it. And what do? We sit down, we cross our legs, and we say, well, at some point we'll get to it. But all the while, Rome is burning. The country is challenged, and we are afraid to act. Why do we not have an internet gaming legislation that creates opportunities for Bahamians to participate in? The same way people can be allowed in this country as foreigners to go to Atlantis to do that, to go to Bahamas to do it, the largest casino in the Caribbean soon to be, to go to Bimini to do it. And we want to discriminate against our own people and say, you are a second-class citizen in your own country. I quote, Mr. Speaker, from a well-known philosopher, Immanuel Kant. And Immanuel Kant said, if I could only open it up on here, Immanuel Kant said, there is only one categorical imperative or absolute, and it is this: act only according to that maxim whereby you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law. More colloquially it reads, and by the way, so I give proper attribution. This comes from, I will give proper attribution at the end. And it goes on, it says, more colloquially, the demand is that in whatever you do, you should act for reasons that could serve as acceptable reasons for anyone. To make an exception of oneself, to act for reasons one could not acknowledge as acceptable, or someone else to act on them, is to act immorally. We sat, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, fellow Bahamians, we sat in a church service last week and we listened to the well-respected Dr. Miles Monroe. I have tremendous admiration and regard for him. But I was trained to be a critical thinker. And when Dr. Monroe said that if we in this place sought to do anything that was not in accordance with the will of that good book and the will of God, you could guarantee and rest assured that he would find himself marching down here in protest thereto. My question is, when will the Christian Council, when will the church, and all of those who say that gambling is immoral, when will they find themselves marching across the bridge to protest against gaming? When will they find themselves marching to Bahamas to protest against gaming? Or are they suggesting that it is not a universal immorality? It is only wrong when it is participated in by Bahamians. Because my conscience tells me I have no objection to making something unlawful as long as you're prepared to make it a universal application. But you cannot tell me that God has a law that it only applies to some and not to all. So if we believe as a country and as a people that morally gaming is wrong, we must shut it down and not allow anyone to participate in it. Because what we are doing as legislators, if we come in this place and promote a law that deprives Bahamians from doing something that foreigners can do, we are developing a psyche in the minds of the Bahamian people that says you are inherently less equal than foreigners. Something that has dogged this country for some time. We roll out the red carpet, we roll out the gold carpet for the foreign investor. But we tell Bahamian investors, you need not apply. You see, the member for Montague said, why is it that we haven't shut them down? But neither is he absolved from the actions of his party when they were last in power. The book, Internet Gaming Law, just so that I can make my proper attribution, I quoted from Jeffrey Sayre McCord from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, from a paper entitled Kant's Grounding for the Metaphysics of Morals. The member for Montague said that this government is wrong for not shutting it down. Where was his party's administration when all of this gaming was taking place in these web shops? And member for Montague, why did your administration not do as Article 52.1 says?
Address the chair, member.
Why did the former administration not do what Article 52.1 mandates for all legislators in this place? And that is to make laws for the peace, order, and good government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Because like in 1961, the United States of America, recognizing the potential threat to their country from illegal gaming, passed a law called the Wire Act. And the Wire Act basically was something that was done to close a loophole that existed, to prevent an action that they felt threatened their country. Well, what did the former administration do, member for Montague? What did they do to try to close loopholes that he knew existed well before this government came to power?
Member for Fort Charlotte, address the chair, through the chair. The member rises on a point of order. Could you resume your seat? Member for Montague.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The member for Fort Charlotte seems to want me to respond to this question.
You're not entitled to respond to a question. The question is a rhetorical through the chair.
Yes, ma'am.
If you rise, if you want to make a comment on a point of order, go right ahead.
What I have endeavored to emphasize since I came into this place is that it is not a reasonable response to an issue that has come up to say, oh, the previous government, the government before, L.O. Pindling or whatever did it. That is not what we should be concerned with. What we need to be concerned with is go forward. It ain't broke, don't fix it. But it is broke and we need to fix it. And this is an issue that the people of this country have voted on in a referendum and stated precisely what their position is with regard to this issue. So whether or not a previous government or this government when they were previously and did nothing about it, that is not our concern. Our concern is going forward. How do we deal with it? That's what my position is, and I trust that he would understand that. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Member for Fort Charlotte.
That's why I'm pushing the envelope, Mr. Speaker. I'm pushing the envelope because I would like to believe that this government recognizes that if we continue to sit idly by and use the fact that this case that was brought before the Chief Justice representing these web shops, if we sit idly by and think that that is going to be perceived as acceptable by a very critical and cynical public, we got another thing coming. Because the public does not believe that we should use the pending case before the Chief Justice as reason to do nothing. with respect to these web shops. This side will continue to say that we are promising, but we are not delivering. And we must not arm them with that argument. Something needs to be done. And it must be done because we have the courage to deal with problems that we know are unpopular. But if we came into this business to be popular, we won't be in this business very long. So when I step on toes, I fear not, because I believe that if I can speak my mind and do so because I feel as though it is what the people who elected me want me to do, I've done no wrong. Mr. Speaker, the Wire Act was passed in the United States in 1961 by U.S. Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy in what they were terming the war on crime. Where is our legislation that deals with what we perceive to be a threat to our national security or international reputation? Furthermore, and do not be mistaken, I am in no way suggesting that we be punitive to anyone. I am suggesting, as I have written previously, that as a country, we cannot have laws that are selectively applied. Justice cannot be blind. Excuse me. The observation of the laws cannot be blind. So when we tell people that web shops are illegal and we have young children who are asking what those things are, and they have these conversations in schools,
We glorify them.
you can't open up a newspaper and see that they're flourishing and expect the children not to wonder whether we're serious.
Give them toys. Toys to the poor.
Now,
Food. Turkey ham.
what I don't agree with that was said by the member for Montague is, his argument seemed to suggest that because these operators are making a lot of money, that is his main concern. But you see, I thought this administration was supposed to be about creating economic empowerment.
The member rises on the point of order. The chair recognizes the member for Montague.
Lord Charlotte seems to misinterpret what I have said in here. I have never suggested that the issue is that the numbers individuals make a great deal of money. That is not the issue.
Check your hands out.
The issue is, you check it all you want. The issue is we have a law which needs to be observed. We had a referendum and the people spoke. I would expect the government, as they had promised, to do what was required by the country. So it's never been a question of money. I don't know where the member gets that from. There was never any suggestion that the money they make is the issue. The issue is simply they're breaking the law and they're producing a very jaundiced attitude by the young people in this country as to what they should do in life, what they should try and achieve, and this is what we have to change. Because as I suggested, we're getting back to the drug culture by the attitude that this type of work brings to the young people in this country.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Member for Fort Charlotte.
Thank you. I want to go to what I see to be a very insidious, it appears to be almost harmless, but it strikes at something very, very important. And that is, when I spoke at the beginning of my presentation, I said there's a lot of political propaganda that takes place behind the scenes, a lot of actions that sometimes persons don't give much thought to. And so that's why, if we're not careful, we allow the political propaganda being practiced by the opposition to take hold, while the public forgets just how complicit the opposition and former government was in the same things that they're now criticizing this administration for. But what I want to raise is something that some may perceive as controversial, but it's important. And I have no interest in doing anything more than what I'm doing now, so I don't want anybody to be mistaken in believing that I have ambition to be a cabinet member or whatever. I don't, and I cannot afford to. So I want to dispel that notion. But I respect the intellect and the capacity of my colleagues, young people in this administration who have tremendous capacity and ability. And we are allowing people who are supposed surrogates to get away with destroying the character, the reputation, and competency of those serving in the cabinet right now. And it is a part of a sinister campaign to totally discredit the young people who are part of Mr. Christie's cabinet. I refer you to page 87 of the Tribune today.
New generation.
And it says, and I quote, somebody who claims to be a surrogate or a supporter of the Progressive Liberal Party, who obviously doesn't recognize how important the new generation of leaders were in electing this party to government today.
Speak for us. Speak for us.
Who says, and I quote, and this surrogate is Mr. George Smith. He says,
Speak for us.
Ryan Pinder is making the rounds, but I don't know how much results you'll see out of that. So in effect, what he's saying is that this government is wasting time and money allowing Ryan Pinder, the member for Elizabeth, to travel around the world representing this government.
Speak for your generation. Speak.
He says, and I quote, and I continue, Kenred Dorset hasn't done anything in housing yet.
Speak again.
Well, you know what? And this is a part of the problem with how we practice government, and why I say we must stop playing the political games. When I watched on NB12 the other night, all of those homes in Pride Estates sitting empty, vacant, brand new homes with fixtures, and they are just deteriorating because there's nobody to fill them. And then the minister responsible for housing, member for Southern Shore, says it will take some time to identify persons to fill those homes because persons who wanted them before no longer want them. So if there's such a long wait, it suggests to me that there's not nearly as much demand to warrant trying to appear to be heroes to the public to build so many more homes that are going to be sitting idle.
Absolutely.
So my point is this. Don't judge the member for Southern Shores on the basis of how many homes he's built. Judge him on the basis of how competent an individual he is, how intelligent he is, and how good his heart is. But if we continue to run a country that says your ability... I don't need it. If we continue to run a country that says, I will grade you on the ability to build houses, then Kenred Dorset and the member for Southern Shores, yes, he would be perceived as a failure. But he is not that.
Empty houses.
What if people are defecating in homes because there's nobody to put in there?
Shame.
And they want to try to discredit the young people in this cabinet to say that they cannot fill Mr. Christie's shoes or the member for Centerville.
Nobody said.
They want to say that all of the new generation, they're lousy. That's what the surrogate is trying to say. You know what the surrogate went on to say? He gives a very gratuitous statement, something, no, but you don't need to do it. What are you saying that for? He goes on to say this. He says, Mr. Smith, this is the Tribune, Mr. Smith also praised Minister of State for Finance, Michael Alkita, saying that, and I quote, a prudent Prime Minister sometime in the future will see the advantage of making him the substantive Minister of Finance.
Yes.
Sometime in the future, wait, the man could be Minister of Finance today. The man could be Minister of Finance today. The last two Ministers of Finance have been what? Lawyers. Lawyers. You mean to tell me a certified financial analyst doesn't have the expertise to be a Minister of Finance today? And we have a man who's obviously thinking 8-9 months down the road to a convention, who's trying to discredit and destroy all of the young people who form the cabinet today. And young people in the cabinet, you're gonna stand around and allow a surrogate whose long past is used by date to destroy you? No, it is wrong, because that is why, as a country, we cannot advance.
You're trying to blow up that bridge.
Because of insecurities, people want to destroy the young.
Trying to blow up the bridge.
Well, they got some good pages on that.
I want to say this because I want to say this for the record.
Good man.
When the member for for Bamboo Town and I, we started the National Development Party in the member for Garden Hills in his office. And the member for Garden Hills could tell you he saw us sitting down and having meetings. And the member for Garden Hills, I know he asked himself many times, where these young fellas think they're going? Where do they think? You know, because at that time he was president of the Real Men's Ministry, and he was having regular meetings of his own. And he wondered, well, what are they concocting in the private offices with this small group of people doing? I like to give credit where credit is due. I like to give credit where credit is due. Dexter Reno Brown, Dr. Dexter Reno Brown, a surgeon as well as a lawyer, he was the one who we embraced his theme on his website that said,
Give him some more time, man. Give him some more time.
Wait. The theme that Dr. Dexter Reno Johnson had on his website was putting Bahamians first. And we embraced it. And you could call me a loose cannon all you want. I take that. I accept it. Give it to me.
You changed it here?
And Dr. Dexter Reno Johnson said putting Bahamians first. So, member for Bamboo Town and I, we talked about it. We said, you know what? That totally encapsulates what we are trying to fight against in our country. And that is that Bahamians are second-class citizens in their own country. So we pushed it. We pushed it.
Yes,
we pushed it. No, Dexter Reno Johnson was a part of the National Development Party at one time. No, I say this. When I joined the Progressive Liberal Party, and if you don't like honesty in politics, then you don't like me, and I would not wish for you to support me. But the people of Fort Charlotte, whether they be PLP, FNM, or DNA, they will know that when I come in here, I keep it real.
Yes.
When I joined the Progressive Liberal Party, and you can find the speech that I made at my introductory rally on February the 16th of 2011. And after I made that speech, the political consultant behind the campaign came to me and she told me, great speech. She told me, and she admitted that that was where the idea came from of believing in Bahamians.
Oh, yeah. Watch your time. Watch your time.
No, I say that to say this. That is why I am so passionate. That is why I'm so passionate about fighting and standing up for we as young people in this party, because you cannot suggest that we are just hangers-on, that we are just here holding up space and not giving credit to the fact that the people in that cabinet, as young members, have just as much to offer as those who've been around a long time, who should not expect to be destroyed by people who claim to be surrogates and senior members of this organization. So if we have nothing to offer, it means that we should never have been a part of the organization's slate of candidates. And I dare say, Mr. Speaker, that that must not be true. That you, as a representative of the new generation of candidates and leaders, you too, sir, must not sit well. That must not sit well with you. So I would like to think that we will stand up for ourselves and not allow ourselves to be divided. That we will stand strong and that we will fight for what we believe in.
Next generation.
Port Charlotte supports this resolution to do what is needed to improve an important infrastructural piece here in the city of Nassau on the island of New Providence. Thank you.